Good afternoon and welcome to our fourth and last session of the PV Magazine Europe Roundtables 2021, the Innovation Hub. Yesterday we had the sessions on quality, on asset management, and on asset management, and this morning we had heard about the great prospects triggered by the EU's lower CO2 targets in the EU Green Deal. Even though European solar markets have a good chance to prosper in the coming years, there are far more business opportunities than just building solar. In the following 2 hours, we will present a closer look at what else photovoltaic project developers and investors may think about besides photovoltaics, where it makes sense to build up know-how, what needs to be considered. In short, where you can be innovative.
Way to become innovative is green hydrogen. The new fuel has made quite a remarkable appearance over the last month, with nation and continent-wide strategies being formed and new alliances being forged. In this session, we will ask the questions of what the impact of these developments will be for the solar sector. And we're going to talk about the opportunities to participate in this upcoming industry. Using solar for hydrogen production, of course, will mean talking about how solar can become even more competitive. And what's actually going on in the battery storage market?
Yeah, that looks a bit weird indeed. There seems to be a common sense in our industry that a lot of battery storage capacity will be required to decarbonize our economy. And scientists agree to this. But on the other side, when we researched for this roundtable preparation, we realized again, so far the battery storage market in Europe has only been successful regionally, so in some countries and in certain segments. And this is why quite a few companies also have lost interest. And we want to understand if it's going to stay like this or whether the euphoria that we are already seeing, for example, in the US will also come to Europe, which would mean that it would make sense for companies to prepare on another level than they are doing at the moment. Additionally, we will also discuss then between hydrogen storage how photovoltaics can become even more competitive through innovation in power electronics, because, for example, for hydrogen production, you also need a very competitive solar levelized cost of energy. And we will touch electromobility and vehicle-to-grid developments, which obviously are closely related to solar and stationary battery storage.
These are the questions that we will be asking for the next 2 hours. And of course, if you have questions for our panelists, you can drop them in the Q&A chat window on the event app, and we'll be feeding them to our panelists over the next 2 hours. Besides the live questions, there are quite a few other ways for you to get involved in our event app. There's still ample opportunity to get to network. After this session, please stay tuned for our 2 networking sessions in English and German. In the German networking session, we are taking the focus on the European upstream solar sector. Modules made in Europe. We are interested why project developers and installers would make a decision to buy such modules. A special thanks also at this stage to our networking partner, FIMER. And don't forget the Meet the Speaker session right after this, where you can speak directly to the majority of the experts that we have brought here onto the program today. To join that, click on the event app on the button called Networking. And if you have questions, you can drop them in the Q&A chat window. We also want to thank our platinum partners for supporting this program. Coming up shortly is Smartenergy, but of course we also want to thank DuPont, Goodwe, Grovat and Jinko Solar.
How much is much, and is much enough? I'm talking about the amount of PV power, of battery storage and hydrogen production capacity which we will have to install in Europe within the next 15 years. And Marta Victoria is assistant professor at the University of Aarhus, and she models energy transition scenarios for Europe and has just published a paper in Nature Communication about this. And she will give us answers to these questions, and she will give us the message, yes, we can. So, Marta.
Hello, everyone. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi. didn't see you before. So yes, great that you are here. And now we are looking for the answers. So just
Well, hello
start your
everyone,
presentation.
and can you see my slides?
No?
Are you
Yet now it will come now, the presentation. Now it's there.
Okay, great. So thank you for the invitation, and hello everyone. I'm glad to have this a few minutes to give you an update of what we do in our research and to present this short overview entitled Yes, We Can, Roles of PV, Battery Storage and Hydrogen in a Carbon-Free Energy World. And I will try to summarize very briefly our recent results. You can check all the details in the paper that we published, but what we did is asking ourselves this question. Well, considering that we have a certain carbon budget and maximum cumulative emissions that we can allow if we want to remain below 1.5 degrees, what can we do? What is the best way of using that cumulative emissions? We compare following two alternative transition paths. First, what is plotted in blue, following start reducing emissions today and go smoothly towards 2050. And second, following what we call a late and rapid path, which entails delaying climate action, but then we will have to change things faster. The first thing that we found is that clearly, without any doubt, it's cost effective to follow the early and steady path. That means to start climate action already today and being very ambitious with that. We also found that the cost-effective way to achieve decarbonization for the whole Europe is to use wind and solar. But then if we are building a whole system based on solar photovoltaics and wind, we're going to need different technologies to balance those generators. And for solar, batteries are particularly well suited. This is because solar has a clear daily pattern, and then batteries can complement them, charging and discharging every day. In order to balance wind, batteries are not the best option because, contrary to solar, wind shows fluctuations that change every few days, few weeks. But in that case, hydrogen can also provide a very good balancing. So hydrogen production together with interconnections among the different countries in Europe can be the key to balance wind fluctuation. So in short, we are going to need all of these, some other key elements, but mainly these four key elements to make a system that is free of carbon emissions. Which technologies do we need to invest in, and when do we need to do that? Well, what we see in our models is that first, what we need to do for the next 10 and 15 years is to support a massive deployment of wind and solar across the whole Europe. You can see that in the investment figure in green. We also need to invest a significant amount of money into power to heat, so decarbonize the heating demand via electrification. On top of that, from 2030 onwards, we will need to also do significant investment in batteries. So we see that our model requires 4,000 gigawatt hours. That's energy capacity. If we consider 4 hours batteries, we will need around 1,000 gigawatt of power capacities. But we also going to need hydrogen. And we can clearly see some sectors in which hydrogen is not competitive, being mainly supply of heating and land transport. And this is because the electrification option is a more cost-effective route. But we also see some sectors in which hydrogen is one of the best options, if not the best. And they are the seasonal power storage. We see that starting from 2040 and until the end, we need 220 terawatt per year of hydrogen for this purpose. But we also see that at the end of the transition paths, getting closer to 2050, we're going to need a massive amount of hydrogen to decarbonize what we call difficult sectors. And that includes shipping, but also the production of synthetic fuels that can be of use to decarbonize the industry and aviation. So in total, around 2050, we are talking about 2,000 terawatt hours per year of hydrogen to help us this decarbonization. With this brief overview, I'm just giving the word to the next speakers, and let's start the discussion. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Marta. We will meet again, Marta, on the storage panel, which we will have at the end of this session, and then you are also able to send questions through the question window to Marta. Thank you very much, and see you later.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea about the numbers provided by Marta, I've done some maths. We have to install more than 1 terawatt of solar only to produce the hydrogen we need in Europe. Our next speaker is one who is one of the early explorers in these fields. It's Christian Pho Duc. He is CTO and Managing Director of Hydrogen Projects at Smartenergy, a well-known project developer and investor for photovoltaics. Christian, okay, I just hear that Christian is not on live so far, so that means that we have to. So our technical team says he's just arriving. Does it make sense?
Okay.
Hi, Christian. Great.
Hello.
There you are. Nice to see you. Yes. Then you haven't got the number which I just mentioned. I just mentioned that Marta has provided us with the number how much hydrogen production we will need around 2050 is really enormous, and that we would need more than 1 terawatt of solar to produce it. So, Christian, CTO of now I have to go back because CTO and Managing Director of Hydrogen Projects at Smartenergy. You already presented your projects on our roundtables last year, but as one can imagine, you have made quite a few experiences since then. Please let us participate and show us your last update on how solar-generated H2 can become competitive.
Thank you very much, Michael. Very happy to be with you here today and with the panelists afterwards. Yeah, in fact, if you can look already into my presentation, thank you very much, and on to the next slide. The hydrogen is really a big stimulus right now for the development of PV, which we also do. And just to give you an example, compared to 2019, the number of projects which are expected, both renewable and low carbon, with respect to hydrogen, has more than doubled, rather tripled within a year of projects coming. And it's kind of such a dynamics that it's hard to keep track. There are several activities by the important projects of common European interest, where we are participating, the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, where we also put our projects in, where there is a mapping of the different stakeholders to shape these projects. Well, it sounds very encouraging in terms of, well, that's the scaling we are looking at, that hydrogen becomes competitive. But these projects are all the announced projects, and they also need to happen. And when they happen, things will become more competitive. So we need to really look into what is needed that these projects happen. And please, next slide. I'll give you a little cost example calculation, which from some of our projects, obviously we have various locations in Southern Europe. But important, first of all, as we saw, Europe is becoming, and there we fully agree with Fatih Birol from the International Energy Agency, as becoming the prime power generation source in 2025 all across Europe in total. And I'm just comparing two examples here. On-site PV, so you generate hydrogen with PV just next by, direct connected, or you do a combination. You take PV with, we have heard about before, the intermittency, and use also electricity from the grid, obviously making sure it is clean, green, renewable electricity. And in the two cases, you see that the cost of the electrolyzer here in green has a different weight. If it's PV only, the loading factor is not as high, and then the capex and the total equation is more important than if you load your electrolyzer higher, and then with that, obviously the electricity costs become even more important. And that's a very important comment. We expect not only a lot of additional renewable electricity, especially from PV, but also at very competitive cost, because this is a prime factor of the cost of the levelized cost of hydrogen. So on the next slide, just one, and there are many projections, obviously, because as we know, in the end, everybody will be wrong and something in the middle will happen maybe. But as we can see here, the projection by Bloomberg is showing that due to the increased level of PV and the intermittency of PV, the nominal pricing, the price expectation is detaching a bit from the other, also renewable energy merchant pricing going down. So if you think of projects right now just on PV side, you need to take into account what is your future income, and if you have chances to stabilize the offtake, making off-taking also in otherwise curtailed moments available, for example, for hydrogen production, this can help your business case. So somehow this is good news for hydrogen and maybe difficult news for solar, or on the other way around, the both together, both can win a lot. On the next slide, I just want to show you also a bit on a quantitative way how this levelized cost of electricity play a bit. These are examples from some of our projects in Portugal and Spain. If you look into grid connected in Portugal, well, you have around today with all the different elements of the cost, which is not just the LCOE from the PV power plant, but the substation, transformer, the infrastructure fees, etc. You get to a range to 44 to 69. If you go into Spain, due to the better situation on the fees, 37 to 59, but you get to the lowest costs, in fact, on a direct line. So somehow, in order to produce the lowest cost of hydrogen also, the direct line seems to be the most optimum. However, in terms of how much you produced on a certain area of land, for example, or you can say, well, you produce less. So it's not always obvious what is the optimum for your project to choose, depending what is the aim and what is the specific project. Coming to the next slide, I mentioned right now the cost of the electrolyzer. And here on these four different blocks, you can see the cost of the electrolyzer, $750, $500, $250 per kilowatt. It's obviously an important factor, as we saw on the chart 2 slides before. The LCOE is the other axis here, the y-axis from 0 to 100. But interesting, also the zero axis is there, because you even have to consider, even at zero electricity cost, you can come to costs of the hydrogen, which are too high. And we are aiming for the dark green below 2 here dollar or euro per kilogram area. And you can obviously increase or improve the situation by increasing the load factor. Increasing the load factor with, we heard just before about storage, about combination solar and wind, which even has to be considered more and more compared to other use cases before. On the next slide, the pre-last slide, just to keep my time, just a little hint to all project PV developers. I mean, what would be great to think about if you plan anyway a PV project, think about, isn't it possible to add additional capacity, not increasing the connection point, which very often is the limiting factor, but by increasing an additional space, which you use then for a collocated hydrogen generation, you can make a lot of use of potential variations of the generation profile of the electricity source and achieving a very interesting business case for hydrogen, meaning this approach wouldn't congest the grid more, and you can add additional capacity. The keyword additionality, we want to have additional PV, additional renewables for hydrogen. On my last slide, I just show a little example on one of our projects where we in fact go for a collocated site. It's in a region of Portugal. We call it the Tagus project. I try still my Portuguese. And here we target the mobility sector. And the thing is, as I mentioned before, we need the scale to get costs down. However, to change a bus fleet, to have a change in infrastructure, this takes time, but we cannot just put one stack after the other to the electrolyzer. So there is a combination here of a bus operator plus a gas grid injection element, and also discussion with industry who also have to adapt their usage. And all these factors together make the total business case, which over time changes the direct offtake of hydrogen increases over time. And by doing that, we do an ecosystem which from the start can start with a scaled project. Next slide, please. And that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. And over to Marian, where we will have the panel discussion.
Well, coming up now is our first panel, and we are welcoming Aurélie Beauvais. Aurélie is the Deputy CEO of SolarPower Europe, and naturally, Aurélie is also very much engaged in the political discussions in Brussels relating to hydrogen. Also, we have Jorgo Chatzimarkakis. Jorgo is the Secretary General of Hydrogen Europe. And we have Christian also joining us here. Thank you for joining the panel again from Smartenergy. And we have Jan-Justus Schmidt. He's the co-founder and managing director of Enapter. And Enapter is developing and producing a very special electrolyzer technology about which we will hear just in a moment. Thank you all for joining this hydrogen session. Jan-Justus, I just teased everybody a little bit with your technology. You have developed a very special electrolyzer, and now you're scaling up production. Can you help Christian to achieve his goal to produce below €2 per kilogram?
Yeah, we certainly hope so. At Enapter, we understand that basically we have to do everything we can to stop burning fossil fuels now and prevent catastrophic climate change. And we're doing. The prerequisite is that low-cost and accessible solar and wind energy are now available, and we are making progress in greening electricity. And of course, we need hydrogen in order to green also molecules and provide the emission-free fuels and gases for industry, heating, transport, long-term energy storage. And this is what we want to do. So this is where Enapter enters the picture. We are leveraging our patented anion exchange membrane, AEM electrolyzer technology, which we are quite sure will make the cheapest hydrogen possible to replace fossil fuels. So our electrolyzers are smart, simple to use, and scalable, giving everyone access to green hydrogen for any use case. We really have a unique approach in the industry, as we are rethinking electrolyzers not as industrial projects, but as mass manufactured products. And I think this audience can understand this is really important. When standardized products become commodities, they can be rolled out cheaper and much faster than all the alternatives, and thereby cut also emissions faster and at a lower cost. This low cost and easy accessibility of energy empowers people to unlock decentralized energy solutions and carbon-cutting business models that were previously impossible. And this is why we see absolutely that the time of the solar hydrogen business model has arrived. And we will get to very, very low costs under the €2 per kilogram, absolutely possible. The decentralizing power of the modular mass-produced solar panels to produce electricity anywhere the sun shines, this can now be paired also with on-site hydrogen production and produce fuels and gases at very, very competitive cost.
Let me jump
We're
in here.
seeing this in the number of partners and customers, right? And this will, as we're going to mass production, this will really it will increase in numbers, and the cost curves here will be very similar to what we see in the PV industry.
Let me jump here, Jan-Justus, because now we are in the electrolyzer topic, and I'm really curious, Christian, have you already chosen an electrolyzer technology, and what is your experience when you're looking for electrolyzers? Does the market offer what you need?
Yeah, well, in fact, we have in the market various technologies, alkaline, PEM, solid oxide, low, high temperature, at different maturity levels. We have engaged right now with two on a stronger level, and I'm discussing with various others, meaning there are solutions on the market. And the thing is right now is that the projects we're working on and that also the electrolyzer companies are looking at really happen. I mean, there's a lot of, how can I say, announcements, letter of intent, etc. But the final investment decision and then really the purchase order on a larger scale is put down at the electrolyzer company. That's what they are also kind of, worrying. They are right now in the situation that they really need to choose the project where they give the highest chance that this will really happen. And in fact, we need really to care that the infrastructure, the environment, the policy, everything fits together, that the initial projects happen, which then pave the way for the future projects to come. So the technology is there, but the project really now needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that is also the intention, obviously, of the hydrogen strategy of the EU and various countries to scale up the projects and to scale up the electrolyzer production so the costs can go down. Jorgo, you present the industry related to hydrogen production, among others, and therefore, maybe you can tell me, in solar industry, we have made the experience 10 years ago that the European production could not compete anymore with the Chinese production. And I know when I talk to people that many think same could happen to electrolyzers. Now we are scaling up. Now we are bringing the cost down of electrolyzers and developing the technology. Do you discuss in your association what conclusions can be drawn from this negative solar example in this case, so that electrolyzers will be still made in Europe also in 15 years and later?
Well, first of all, let's turn the negative solar example into a positive solar example. I believe very much that we still are in a position to bring back to Europe big parts of the solar value chain. And of course, we are discussing that. It is indeed a lesson to learn. And I think the mistake that was made back then was not to be patient. There was a big investment into the solar sector, but then there was not enough patience from the public side, and then also the private side pulled out. Now, what we can do here now is indeed, as we have heard, to build up these projects that create manufacturing of electrolyzer capacities here in Europe. The EU has the plan to build up 2 times 40 gigawatt capacities, 1 time 40 in Europe, another time 40 in the direct neighborhood, Ukraine, Northern Africa, MENA region. And this is very promising. We have some tools to work on that. The European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, Aurélie, later on will also possibly talk about her roundtable, which is a crucial one in that European Clean Hydrogen Alliance. Also the important projects of common European interest run by the member states. And these instruments at the moment are engineering big projects to overcome the chicken and egg dilemma, so that we know exactly how big will the purchase order be for Enapter and for other electrolyzer companies in the next years. So we detected the problem, and we think, and we are sure we found a solution to overcome it. So I'm very confident.
Marian, are there already audience questions?
Yes, we do have some questions from the audience, and one question is for you, Christian. It's not particularly close to the financial questions that we are just discussing right now, but it's more for safety. You suggested earlier that one way to improve the load factor of hydrogen generation plants is by adding storage. Do you physically collocate the battery with the electrolyzer and also the hydrogen tanks? This question is related to safety concerns here in particular, but I think it would be also interesting to hear from a financial aspect whether you're collocating these three.
Yeah. I mean, every hydrogen project needs a certain level of storage, except it goes straight without any control into a grid, for example. So it's a must to control it. Very often I hear the question about, isn't it too dangerous on the hydrogen, the Hindenburg, some know of what I'm talking about, pictures, but in fact it can be very well managed. Obviously the corresponding safety measures needs to be taken into account, distances, etc. But apart from that, I don't see a special risk. And also from the financial side, looking into it, as long as you do the right, how can I say, you follow the right rules, some are still in definition for these collocating topics, I don't see a higher risk, and also I'm not afraid of financial constraints because of collocation.
I allow another question here at this stage, and that is regarding water use. I mean, this is probably a topic in Portugal where you're working since to make hydrogen. You have to split water, and that consumes water. Is this a concern at all from an environmental perspective?
dimension. There's water scarcity in Portugal, obviously, much higher than in more northern countries. And you need to take a very, how can I say, aligned approach also in your municipalities you are working with. Obviously, waste water treatment is a great opportunity to combine it. If you use fresh water, just to say the level amount of water really used compared with other usages, agriculture, but also industrial usages, is not that huge as it might seem for hydrogen production. But still, it's a very important topic to care about desalination, obviously, for other regions. These kind of approaches need to be considered to make them competitive to use water, not as a primary source, taking away from other priorities.
Okay. I want to switch to another important topic here. Regulations will have a great impact on how hydrogen will be produced, how cheap it will be, and which industries will be the first ones to use it. In this respect, what has been the latest talk in Brussels Süd district, and what should catch the interest of the solar industry? Aurélie, I will address this question to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Marianne. Well, I think one thing we can say is that Jorgo here did an amazing job in bringing hydrogen very high on the political agenda. And it's clear that we're discussing at the moment a series of critical texts which will really shape the future of renewable hydrogen and make sure that we can make it as competitive as possible, as early as possible. What you need to be looking at is, for example, the Fit for 55 package, where we have the upcoming review of the Renewable Energy Directive, notably, and the current gas package, which should also define very important elements related to market design, infrastructure ownership, etc. The chicken and egg question, which Jorgo mentioned earlier, is really the crux of the problem and the nut that policymakers need to crack at the moment. Basically, even though we are absolutely convinced that renewable hydrogen will have a critical role to play, we need to look at the situation where it is now. And today we know that only 4% of hydrogen produced in Europe is renewable. And we know that hydrogen produced from renewable electricity and through electrolysis is still less competitive than other CO2 abated sources or technologies, such as hydrogen, so-called blue hydrogen, which is from natural gas with carbon capture and storage. And the problem we have is that until we are able to match the competitiveness of conventional-based solutions, market pool instruments cannot only function under the principle of technology neutrality. The European Hydrogen Strategy has established very ambitious targets, which were mentioned earlier, and which Jorgo recalled, with the objective notably to develop 40 gigawatts of renewable hydrogen electrolyzers by 2030 in Europe. And the instruments that we need to be looking at in order to accelerate the competitiveness here cannot be colorblind or technologically blind. The market pool instruments, which are currently under discussion, what we think at SolarPower Europe, they should be entirely directed towards only renewable hydrogen solutions. And that's very interesting because the hydrogen strategy itself acknowledges that hydrogen produced from renewables is the only clean hydrogen, so-called in the definition. And we need to tackle, let's say, this market uptake strategy through various angles. The most obvious one is to develop support schemes at production level in order to accelerate the cost competitiveness of renewable hydrogen produced. So that's both support to the producers, solar producers, but also to the electrolyzers operators. Once we've done that, we still need to create the market. And there are a series of instruments which are under scrutiny, which we also support partially at least, considering, for example, the introduction of dedicated quotas in hard-to-abate sectors, such as industry. So they should be required to use gradually more and more renewable hydrogen over time. And obviously, it should be matched with the adequate level of support, because we know that securing the offtake today is really the biggest issue which we have to scale up hydrogen projects in Europe globally. Maybe one thing I will add very quickly is that in this whole discussion, certification systems, it's a very boring question, but it's actually quite critical as we discuss in the policy landscape. How can we define and certify renewable hydrogen? And in particular, how can we make sure that we are not double counting the electron or the renewable electron which is being produced? And that is really a conversation which is very technical, but actually will define also how we define support schemes, how we condition the granting of support schemes to off-takers, for example, and how we can account for the contribution of renewable hydrogen production to the European overall targets. So we have a lot of work on our table.
Solar developers and investors will have in this field. Is it foreseeable when the decision will be made on this? Will it be this year or next year, or when can? Because I think also investment security is important for the people who are really thinking of setting up such projects.
I think we expect a proposal, at least when it comes to support schemes in the Renewable Energy Directive, potential quotas. We would expect a proposal mid-July. And then if you follow the classical policy making timelines, maybe we can hope for all of this to be approved already mid-2022. I think that would be a reasonable ambition.
Yeah. I would be also very interested to hear the position of Hydrogen Europe on this. How is it? I mean, in your name you have Hydrogen Europe. Are you focused on green hydrogen in this respect?
You're mute, Jorgo, I think.
We cannot hear you, Jorgo.
Yeah.
I cannot unmute myself.
Now you're unmuted.
Sorry, I cannot unmute myself. Thanks to the technical room. I think we are focusing very much on a threshold, on a clear threshold that is so ambitious that basically only green hydrogen qualifies for that. But there are some promising future technologies that might also give other solutions a possibility. But for the moment, it's definitely the renewable production of hydrogen that is the way to invest. And this threshold, it comes with a taxonomy. The European Commission has set up a list of investments that are sustainable. The current threshold speaks of a decarbonization of 75%. So most of the blue hydrogen projects would not qualify for that. Only very few, very thermal ones. That's why the threshold for us is much, much more important than an ideological fight. As the best marriage in the renewable world is indeed the one between solar and hydrogen, I think this is the path to go. We can already see that investments take place in sun-rich areas. We can already see that first customers are there to buy the hydrogen, especially for the users that are using today gray, so fossil hydrogen, unfortunately, but they can replace that immediately. And that's what we want to do in the long run, the replace strategy. With this green hydrogen, you can replace coal, oil, gas, and nuclear. Okay. And this is the promising way.
Thank you. We have to move forward fast. Therefore, I would like to drop a last question on this issue for Christian. Do you wait for the decision on this? Does that impact your market chances for the hydrogen? And do you have a wish concerning this threshold as solar project developer?
Yeah, well, we count absolutely that renewable hydrogen is the path to go. So we invest only into that direction. And also looking into other options, even the carbon capture can have some idea when you do think about utilization afterwards and synthetic fuels, for example. There could be something which makes sense, but in general, our investments go into the renewable side. And also we cannot really wait because these decisions happen and then the project lifetimes to make projects really ready to build are long. If you wait too long, then you're too late afterwards. So we move ahead as much as we can. Obviously, the big investment decisions are done when the framework really is set.
Okay, thank you very much. And this we wanted change a bit the topic. Demand can be cost-driven. We are talking a lot about cost when we talk about hydrogen, but there are also applications which one normally does not consider. Our colleague Friederike Egerer has prepared a short interview with Pasi Vainikka, CEO of Solar Foods, a Finnish startup which is working on such a surprising application.
Using renewable energy, this Finnish food tech startup claims to have found a revolutionary way to produce a natural protein with just electricity and air. Today we are welcome, as Michael said, Pasi Vainikka, the CEO of Solar Foods, to tell us more about it. Welcome, Pasi. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much.
So, Pasi, your claim states that you are creating food out of thin air, the natural protein soline. What do you need to create this?
We are using a technology called gas fermentation. We do have microbes in a fermenter.
My apologies, Pasi, to interrupt you. I can't hear you at this point.
Okay.
I don't have your live feed on my audio right now. So I'm not quite sure. Could someone from the tech team quickly help me out and get my audio feed live? My apologies. Maren, could you check? I would suggest, Pasi, sorry about this, that I invite Marian to join me on stage to continue the interview here. So sorry about this. But yeah, to come back to that question, your claim states that you are creating food out of thin air, the natural protein soline.
Can you
what do you need to create
that
this?
you are
Marian,
hearing
do you
me?
want to join me?
I got the good earpiece, and Pasi, your claim states that you're. So what do you need to create this? And keep it short and high level, and no need to go into the whole production process, but we would like to see the protein bottle during our call, of course.
Okay. So you can hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. We have naturally occurring microbes that happen to be so that they are using, instead of sunlight or sugars as a source of energy, hydrogen, and carbon dioxide as a source of carbon. Of course, we need a little bit hydrogen and some minerals, but otherwise these are the main constituents that the organism needs to grow, and it happens to be whole food, protein, carbs, and fats.
So that's how you produce it, and then you simply cook it, and what does it taste like?
Taste is neutral, it doesn't have any taste. Nutritionally, we are speaking of a powder that is somewhere between carrot, dried meat, and dried soy.
Okay, so let me ask you, why did you start producing this particular product?
About 1/3 of the climate impact to human action is due to what we eat. We do have energy technologies to deal with the remaining 70% of the global emissions, but for the food system, we don't really have fundamentally better solutions than the current form of agriculture. But this technology route provides actually kind of a new wheat, new primary ingredient to the food system.
I'm back. Hi, Pasi. So why are you producing your own hydrogen?
Hydrogen, at the end of the day, after we scale, we are going to the market in early 23, so in about 2 years' time, building our first factory, and after that scaling to what we call a factory scale, 10,000 tons per year. And at that scale, electricity and hydrogen represent about 1/3 up to 50% of the production cost. And we find it simple actually to produce hydrogen on the site for the microbes.
Great. Thank you, Pasi. That was a very short interval here, interrupted by my tech problems. My apologies there. But if you want to see Pasi, he's joining our Meet the Speaker session after this Cornerstone session. And if you have more questions about Solene and Solar Foods, for example, their collaboration with the European Space Agency, reach out to Pasi there or on the event space. And yeah, back to you, Marian and Michael.
Thank you, Friederike.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Friederike and Pasi. Jan-Justus, you have found this application in your hydrogen challenge, which you, where you ask people or companies to apply and present surprising applications. Can such applications really have a major effect on the hydrogen business?
Yeah, thanks. So that's really great. I must admit, I'm not an expert on this matter, of course, but the pitch is quite convincing, and Solar Foods are definitely not the only ones thinking into this direction. We have a lot of customers that want to do stuff with their hydrogen that actually we never thought about before. And so we're wondering if we've seen all the killer applications for hydrogen already, and most likely we haven't. And yeah, for us, this is important. We think it's very important that we don't prematurely rule out certain fields of application for hydrogen, and instead we let ingenuity thrive, which is also why we had this challenge to look for interesting solutions that can be done with hydrogen. And yeah, Solar Foods actually is a perfect example of why hydrogen is such a multi-talent. It can play a role not just only in energy industry, but decarbonization, food and agriculture is also very important. And yeah, I guess these are just more very good reasons not to reduce hydrogen just to a competitor of batteries, for example. The applications, the value of the molecule is just so much more than that of the original electrons.
Right. So we discussed costs, and Christian, how important are these costs for you and for your first off-takers? Do you already have agreements?
Be financially viable also for our customers, and however they need also to ask the essential question to themselves: what happens if I don't act, especially for hard to abate industries? And they can either invest, for example, into carbon capture, I said before, but is that really sustainable? Is it as effective? Or do I pay for the CO2 with the risk of the increasing CO2 price, which is happening now? So in the end, if you calculate all together, investing into hydrogen can be the better choice. Obviously, they expect that the gap to today's level of expenditures is not too high. Also the subsidies, which in the end we are looking for, that they are not needed at all anymore, don't allow for too big gaps. So we need to get to this kind of €2 per kilogram or below. That's just a very generic number because it depends also on the location and everything. But I think there is a path, and our customers start to be ready to invest into this investment into the future, you can say, because otherwise also competition will do this decarbonization, and customers will choose the decarbonized product and not the polluting product, even if it's the same price.
To make some calculations there again. I mean, €2 per kilogram, it's a great target, I think, from when we see where we started a couple of years ago and where we now, and it will also not be the end, of course. You will go down further than if you look further in the future. But €2 per kilogram is still 6 cents per kilowatt hours. That's a simple calculation how you can convert euro per kilogram to cents per kilowatt hour. And natural gas today is below 1.50 cents per kilowatt hour. So green hydrogen is still with this target will be 4 times more expensive than natural gas today. Can it just find its markets? Or Jorgo, what do you think? What sort of programs do we need?
Well, it doesn't match like this, of course, as you say. So carbon content is the new currency. You need to price carbon.
But it must be a very, very high carbon price. I haven't calculated that now so fast, so it has to be 200 euros.
Just to give you one example, the biggest ship owner, Maersk, the Danish guys, came up last week with a proposal to put $450 per ton of fuel in the seaside. So they say, we must do that. Maersk is only one example. I hear many others. We have 278 members, and many of our members want a clear carbon pricing. Otherwise, it will not work. Of course, there are also other mechanisms that we need to show here. One is the carbon contract for difference. So in order to levelize the costs for the users of hydrogen, let's stay with the agriculture, so people who use fertilizers made with green hydrogen instead of gray, they will get a carbon contract for difference. So the costs that they have on top are levelized by a state aid scheme that we are just discussing with DG Competition. And this state aid scheme will not be forever, of course. It will be degressive, but it will be on for a time. It will be up for a time that we need. We think that the kickoff phase is now until 25, and this levelizing phase is from 25 to 35. After 35, we will see a liquid hydrogen market all over the globe.
Aurélie, what is your position on this? Where will you see the applications for solar-generated hydrogen to be? Do we need policy measures? Or I think we need policy measures, but which do we need?
I mean, one thing is that there are more and more studies coming out which are also putting a bit of nuance to the need actually to match certain values, so to the $1.5 per kilo of hydrogen, for example, or the €2 that you mentioned. I mean, the LCOH, we know it, it's mostly the biggest part are the cost of electricity and the capex for the electrolyzers. So for the cost of electricity, the answer is clear. We need to install more and more renewables. And the more we install it, the more every month, every 6 months, we have those updates from all the possible agencies which are acknowledging that costs just keep coming down. So that per se, and having ambitious policies for renewables, will already start delivering. For that, we have very concrete issues related to permitting, relating to electricity grids, which have to be overcome, both for the electricity and the hydrogen transition. On the electrolyzer side, I mean, we're talking about a concrete top runner program, an industrial strategy where the EU really needs to support large-scale electrolyzer factories all across Europe. And for that, I think Jorgo referred to the experience and the learnings of the solar sector. And I think one mistake which we did in the past was not to be bold enough, not to be focused enough. And that is why political clarity today and a clear commitment also in the instruments that we develop to say, we go for renewables, we go for electrolyzers, and we are going to support this industry in the way forward. It will be critical also to unlock access to cheaper finance and to give the political clarity to investors that is needed. So that is one part, and that's also why we insist that keeping the door open to so-called transitional technologies, which is also a big discussion we're having in Brussels, it is blurring the message for the investors, for the policymakers, and it is impacting potentially the access to finance for purely renewable projects and technologies. Maybe one element, there is a study from Material Economics, which was released last November. And it's interesting because it shows that even with costs that may not be perfectly competitive today for solar hydrogen, there is a market, there is a demand. And if we look at, so this report looks at a series of industry types or potential off-takers, such as the car industry, where even if your steel, for example, would be produced with renewable hydrogen that would be slightly more expensive, the impact at the end use, at the very end product, such as the car, the impact on the price could be actually quite limited. And we're talking about a ratio of maybe 120 to 200 euro more for a car, for an EV, for example. And when you look at the cost of an EV, you know that 120 or 200 euro, it's not really what's going to change the deal if you're ready to invest in such a product. So there is a market already.
Thank you very much. I think we should have a look to the audience question, because they are really coming in, and the audience can also upvote. So Marian, what is the most upvoted question maybe?
The most upvoted question we actually already asked, that was the question of co-location, but I'll ask the second one, and it's something that relating to what you just said, Aurélie, we need to add more and more renewable energies to produce all that hydrogen, and the question is relating to what's actually the conversion efficiency at the moment. And maybe Jan-Justus, you can also give an outlook to where we can go physically. What's the physical limit of conversion efficiency from producing hydrogen from solar power and then using it in various applications?
I understand why the question is asked, because it's not always easy to understand and compare efficiencies actually on a technical level. It's important to look at the complete system efficiency. So currently, if we're looking at the complete electrolyzer efficiency of the entire system, that is the stack with the balance of plant. The efficiency is that we require about 50 kilowatt hours of electricity to produce a kilogram of hydrogen. This is pretty good. With our AEM electrolyzer here, we are definitely at the top of the among the best efficient electrolyzers. But the technology is still under development and continues to have, while it's already in commercial stage, we're continuing to develop it. There's potential to improve also the efficiencies further, which is extremely important. Of course, as the electricity cost is the major contributor to the final cost of the hydrogen. So I think realistically, in the next few years, there can be the efficiency can be improved by a few percentage points very quickly, and the priority must be to roll out the systems very quickly and to continue to reduce the cost and to continue to improve the efficiency. Now we're at 50 kilowatt hours per kilogram. Realistically, 45 kilowatt hours per kilogram can be achieved very quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. It's fascinating to see how a new industry is emerging. I mean, if you look what is related to solar, we have seen it with solar, we have seen it with battery storage, and now we are seeing it with hydrogen. And I think we will see a lot of innovations and developments and clarification of all these open questions in the coming years. We want to thank all of our guests of this session. It was great to have you here as part of PV Magazine, Roundtables Europe, Aurélie Beauvais, SolarPower Europe, Jorgo Chatzimarkakis, Hydrogen Europe, Christian Pho Duc, Smartenergy, and Jan-Justus Schmidt, Enapter. Thank you very much. The industry is on the move in many places, and we are interested in what the players are doing and why they are doing what they are doing and in which way they are doing it. One such moving player is Manfred Groh. He is manager hydrogen projects at BayWa r.e. Manfred should now appearing here.
Yes, hello.
Hello, Manfred.
My pleasure to be here.
Nice to meet you. BayWa r.e. is well known, among others, for the first huge PPA financed solar power plant in Spain. Now, Manfred, you are also developing hydrogen business. When you have decided to expand in this direction, and why now?
So, I mean, as we in BayWa r.e. Group, we are always open for innovative solutions to decarbonize the industry. That's our main focus. You're always looking what's happening. And a few years ago, when all this analysis came up, that we need this amounts of hydrogen, we already heard about it. And when we were in first discussions with our C&I customers, so commercial industrial customers, that also talked about use cases for hydrogen, we became confident to look deeper into this topic. And so we also decided to make our hands dirty, more or less, and looking for first pilot projects to really learn what it means to have a hydrogen project. So we started this, and we started developing pilot projects and.
And you have also brought with you some slides to give us an overview about the 3 use cases which you're elaborating and working on.
Right.
So we are really curious about that, and then we will have further questions after that.
Okay, you see the slides?
Yes, we see it.
Perfect. Okay, so let me show you a few of our projects we are working on. Just beforehand, I mean, we are thinking of more or less 4 categories at the moment where we see projects. Let me switch to the laser pointer. How they, what are the motivations to have hydrogen projects? The first motivation is to mitigate grid congestion issues. So if you want to install more renewables somewhere, but the grid is full, you can't get the grid connection, then hydrogen could be an option. This is one project we are looking at. Another motivation clearly is to supply for local hydrogen demand. Here we are working on 2 pilot projects I will show you in a minute. And then, obviously, the next steps are really large-scale, least-cost hydrogen production, where you really have a multi- or three-digit, four-digit megawatt scale of hydrogen production, standalone, subsidy-free. Also, we are planning on these types of projects. And the fourth category to have the complete picture would be small-scale home solutions, since we are also active in the PV trading. So this could be an issue for us as well. But let's move to these three projects. So the first one I want to show you is a project called Sinnevetterstoff. This is Frisian and means sun hydrogen. And this is really the main goal of this project, to investigate how hydrogen production, co-located hydrogen production at one of our PV plants could mitigate grid congestion. So the goal is to have hydrogen production in future to enable and speed up the addition of renewables. In the Netherlands, for example, we have a huge pipeline of PV projects, and part of it we can't develop further because there is no option that we get a grid connection within the next years, which can also save on grid expansion measures and the flexibility of electrolyzers can use for the grid. So this is clearly grid motivated. Clearly, we want to learn from this project, and we're working here with together with Alliander. Groenleven is our BioRE subsidiary in the Netherlands. Alliander is a huge grid operator for electricity and gas grids in the Netherlands. And together we will run this project Sinnevetterstoff. It is connected to a 50 megawatt PV plant we built the last years. It's also connected to the grid. It has the same grid connection point. We install an 1.3 megawatt AEL electrolyzer from Green Hydrogen Systems there. And we, BioRE, will operate this machine, plan the production, purchase the electricity. We sell the hydrogen. Today there is the press release, or it will be released, that we sell the hydrogen to third-party offtaker. In this case, it's Green Hydrogen Systems, a local gas trader in the Netherlands. And we also do, we operate the machine, we do some remote monitoring and service for the installation. And the nice thing is it's almost there in the machine. We are planning the commissioning of the machine for September, October. So just to give you an impression here, this is around 40 kilometers southwest of Groningen in the Netherlands. Here you see parts of the for the PV plant we built. It's not the complete picture here. And here we will install the hydrogen installation. And just to give you an impression of what it will look like in the end, I hope in a few months I can show you a real picture of this. Here you see containerized solutions for the electrolyzer. You see a storage, local storage that we also want to put there in order to test some things, how stable we can produce hydrogen with the electrolyzer from PV-powered electricity. And the hydrogen is filled then into up to three trailers here, and each trailer can take up a few hundred kilograms of hydrogen. So this is the project we are most working on with respect to grid congestion issues. And now I want to show you two projects where we work on supplying local hydrogen demand. One, I cannot tell you the name, unfortunately, yet. I hope in a few weeks as well. Is a project in Germany where there will be the demand coming from 30 to 35 buses and public transport, hydrogen buses, and we will supply there together with some cooperation partners up to something 15 companies, for example, and administrative districts as well. And we will supply here a 5 megawatt AEL electrolyzer powered by local production of PV, but also by power that comes over the grid, and produce something like 400 to 600 tons of hydrogen per year, and transport it to these filling stations. And the nice thing here is that from our mother company, Bava AG, from the classic energy side, they will do all the logistics and the operation of the filling stations here. Also, there are third-party off-takers in industry and mobility as well. And to show you one more, and this project, will come end of next year. We are confident to install it end of next year and go in operation. And the third project is a project in Spain in the port of Barcelona area. Is a very broad cooperation of different companies with electrolyzer companies. Enapter is also involved here. But also companies that provide hydrogen trucks, for example, the port area, and a lot of off-taker for the mobility that can be done by hydrogen as well. So the focus is here, but not only, but the focus is on providing hydrogen for trucks, hydrogen trucks in the port area. This project will be in 2 phases. The first phase will start with a 20 megawatt electrolyzer or electrolyzer capacity, several electrolyzer techniques, and in a second phase for a 100 megawatt, an additional 100 megawatt electrolyzer. And here it's not that mature already. The project we applied for several subsidy schemes in the Spanish government, but also on EU level. Yeah, that's it, more or less. Just a short overview of the pilot projects we are working on.
Thank you very much, Manfred. We have already got audience questions to this. For efficiency, it seems important to use the heat from electrolyzation. Do you have use cases for this? And are you using the heat? What do you think of it? Short answer, please.
Not at these 3 pilot projects. We are thinking of using actually the oxygen that is produced for at another project. The heat is also an issue, and I don't think that it's really the deal breaker in the end to use the heat. But in the end, it's always the combination. What can you do locally with all the other parameters around the project? So if there is something where we can sell the heat and the hydrogen and the oxygen, this would be perfect. Up to now, it's so early stages. I mean, clearly, all these projects are not economy viable without subsidy at the moment, or without willing to invest in pilot projects. So no. Not yet.
You have almost already answered the second question from the audience, because it was about the cost of compressed hydrogen in this project. I would have framed it in the way where that can be competitive on the market for the fueling stations, but you said already you always need subsidies for these projects.
Yes and no. I mean, for subsidies for sure, but all the hydrogen you can now buy on hydrogen fueling stations, which is fossil hydrogen in most cases, is also subsidized in a way, because usually you can't really operate a fueling station for €7 per kilogram of hydrogen, even if it's fossil hydrogen. So clearly, when all these markets scales up, and the hydrogen offtake is enough, and the capex for electrolyzers goes down, then we will not need any subsidies anymore. That's for sure. That's our goal.
We see that the image is not moving anymore, but we can hear you well.
Okay.
You always plan to collocate solar and hydrogen generation?
No, that makes the impression now for this project, but for the third project in Barcelona, we also feed electricity from the grid to the project. So it really depends on the setup, and I think in the future, when we will build standalone hydrogen projects with I don't know, something like 300, 500 or 1,000 megawatt of PV installation, clearly then we have to co-locate it with the hydrogen production. It's no way to transport this electricity via the grid. But it really depends on the project.
But do you also think on PPAs?
Yes, we do. Yes,
on electricity PPAs. That's what I meant.
Yes. Mainly at the moment, we are in touch with several industrial companies to do this. Because the electrolyzer capacities we are talking there are in the range of 10, 20, 50, 100 megawatt. This can, at least in Central Europe, easily transported via the grid. But as the installations will get bigger, then it's an issue.
I mean, you are also setting up PPAs. We know that from solar plants, where you have also a subsidiary which is doing PPAs as PPA off-taker. What makes it a challenge to set up an electricity PPA for hydrogen production? Because you say it's more difficult.
Yeah. It's more difficult because, I mean, there's the regulatory scheme. So when do you have to pay grid charges and how much, and EEG levy in Germany, for example, and it depends very much what should be the quality of hydrogen you want to produce. Is it simply hydrogen that comes from some electricity, or is it a light green hydrogen with a very cheap GOOs from old water power plants, or do you really want to produce the super duper green hydrogen for the mobility sector, for also getting greenhouse gas quota in the RED II scheme, for example? Then you need additionality, so new unsubsidized plants with a strong time correlation and also local correlation. So putting this all together is more challenging. You have to take into account much more parameters than only for delivering electricity.
Short RED II is a European regulation. Just really a short, maybe yes and no answer. You are already in discussion with potential off-takers, electricity off-takers for electricity PPAs for hydrogen production?
Yes, we are. I mean, these are several industrial customers that plan to install hydrogen production locally on their site. Different sizes.
But probably you also will have to wait until the decisions will be made on the EU level. Is that true?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So, no, I mean, we are in discussions. We are planning these. Obviously, we haven't signed such a contract yet because we are waiting what comes out of the regulation. But yes, we are working on these PPA.
Thank you very, very much. We have to move on with this.
Thank you.
That was Manfred Groh, Manager Hydrogen Projects by RE.
Many of you participated in our scavenger hunt. Thanks to everyone who joined the session and who joined the race for our top 3. I can now announce our winners. It was a close race, but Sam Yoon claims the first place with 810 points. Sam can look forward to a 1-hour virtual meeting with our publisher, Eckhard Gores. And the second place goes to Stelian Mirica with 790 points. At the last roundtable, Stelian actually claimed the first prize. As I said, it was a close race this time, and better luck next time. Thanks for joining again, Stelian. And the third place goes to Paulina Liao-Gaudeiter with 770 points. Thank you all for your efforts, and congratulations to our winners. Back to you, Michael.
Competitive solar hydrogen is only possible with competitive solar, which of course is a value for itself, as we know. FIMER, the inverter manufacturer from Italy, is giving us an example how innovation for power electronics helps decreasing the levelized cost of electricity. For this, I welcome Filippo Carzaniga. He's chairman of the board of FIMER, and Maren Schmidt, managing director utility of FIMER. Hello, Filippo. Hello, Maren.
Hello to everyone, and thanks for inviting me.
Nice to meet you. Yes, we will just jump into the presentation which you have brought with you, and then we will have quite some time to ask questions after that. So we are looking forward for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you see the presentation?
Not yet. Just now we see it.
Okay, very good. Why we start from the 22 of June 2021? Because we are going to launch brand new platform for the utility segment of the market, and in this occasion we will anticipate to you some insights and some characteristic of those platforms without giving, of course, not many technical details, because the official launch will be on June 22. And this will be a completely brand new era for the solar market, because we are completely changing the approach to the utility segment, and we are bringing the modular technologies that always distinguish FIMER to a next level, to a next step, which was the driver of this change. We analyzed that the economical benefit of the pure centralized inverter is progressively vanishing due to the latest innovation into the power electronics and into the miniaturization of the power electronics. And the extensive development time and cost for the pure centralized inverter are making it difficult to keep pace with the rapid evolution of the market. As you know, the market is changing very fast, and we need to be flexible and scalable if you want to stay accordingly with the market needs. And the really high risk and costs associated to the components and the functional parts of solutions of the centralized platform in the long term. For this reason, we tried and to completely change our approach, and which were our objectives. We rationalized the utility system into a brand new modular concept for the utility scale, optimizing and increasing the yield for the 61% in one side that is using and is going to use the centralized solution, so utility scale with pure string inverter, multi-MPPT, and disruptive completely the inverter market of the centralized architecture that is representing today the 39% of the market for customers that are still using centralized architecture. And focus on utility development, the pure modular power block, reducing the time to the market and the management cost, especially for the O&M, thanks to the scalability, and we are drastically reducing with those platforms the downtime cost, because we can guarantee an availability of the 99.9% that is unachievable by any pure centralized inverter. If we analyze the market trends, we can see that progressively the string solutions are gaining market share. We started in 2016 with the 38% of the market, arriving the next year and to the 61%. But the 39% of the customer in the market are still using centralized architecture. Why they are using a centralized architecture? For many reasons. For example, there are many customers that are facing higher costs of VOP using pure string inverter, and there are customers that having an AC-DC ratio of over 120% have really high AC losses, and the centralized architecture is beneficial for them. So we are launching two different platforms for the utility market. One is a pure decentralized solutions with additional strong benefit, and the other one is a completely brand new disruptive solutions that is going to replace all these pure centralized unit with the customer and with the installations that are preferring the centralized architecture for their PV plant. So we are covering in this way the 100% of the utility segment. With the decentralized system, what we are going to do, we are going to realize the most powerful inverter into the string inverter into the utility segment, with especially the highest power weight ratio in the category of more than 3 kilowatt per kilogram. So is the highest ratio into the market today. The compatibility with the ultra power modules with a single module, so of the 182 cell or 210 cell, pure compatibility, with a very strong capabilities in string diagnosis through the online IV curve analysis, and the DC series arc fault interrupter to avoid any kind of problem in terms of safety. And these are very strong characteristics that we are going to launch with the brand new platform. So going to the real advantages of this new platform. In terms of logistic and installations, we are going to save the 30% of the overall cost thanks to the record high capacity and to the ratio of power weight ratio. On the AC and the BOS, up to the 50% higher capacity of the in terms of medium voltage stations. And in terms of compatibility with the high power PV modules, optimizing the latest ultra power modules, enabling the cost savings compared to the standard modules. But especially if we consider the total savings of the new solutions, we are between the 0.7 and 1.1 cent per watt lower than any other solutions today available into the market. So a very strong optimization in respect to what we've seen until now. If you are going to the next step, so the 39% of the market that is still using and they will use the centralized architecture for the installations, we are going to realize this brand new platform that is the most powerful single-stage modular inverter into utility using string inverter, that will replace any conventional inverter and solutions with the same footprint, because it's fully scalable and we can cover any solutions already installed, especially for the revamping, in case of revamping. The reduced cost of O&M compared to the centralized solutions, of course, because it's much easier to be maintained. It doesn't need any kind of specific activity on site, especially in the remote installations, and the downtime is going to zero, because if we see the downtime with an availability of the 99.9% is really going to zero, and it's very easy and can be done by everyone, and it's fully scalable. So we can cover any power block size to the market. If we go to the advantages of this kind of solutions, we see that in terms of O&M, we have an advantage and a saving of 1.3 euro cent per watt. That is typically saving into the 25 years thanks to the granularity of the conversion on the conversion system. An availability of plus 0.4% respect to the best condition of the centralized unit. A power density that is really compared to the SC capacity and full equipped plug-and-play 40-foot container, we can reach the 7.2 megawatt, but fully scalable for lower sizes. So exactly the same of the most common centralized unit. And in definition, the LCOE, that is the much more important element to be considered designing a PV plant, respect to the centralized unit and comparable in terms of competitiveness of the system, we are saving the LCOE between 1.5 and 2.5%. I would like to leave Maren to go in deep on the digital capabilities of our solutions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Filippo. Actually, yes, digital is another aspect which is very important for sure. The energy market is changing fast and evolves continuously, becoming every day more connected with the external world. So storage, EV, building automation, CHPs, all this cannot exist without digitalization. So our grid edge solution is the pillar to integrate on one side the digital and the physical layers into services which are required by the market and which are needed to satisfy the customers' need and also the need for the electrical system. We can think about the large plant controlling, grid integration, the forecast, optimization of digital electrical resources and loads. It's up to participation in electricity market, but also very important for us, and this is also mentioned already by Filippo, OPEX part-wise, the intelligent diagnostic and prognostic and cross-sector optimization. Maybe just shortly regarding large-scale digital platform we have. In utility, our smart gateway, the VSN 700CG, is the edge solution to enable on one side services and to transform the complexity through an easy integration of multiple devices in one unique platform. And with the Aurora Vision, we integrate on-site, on one side PPC, SCADA, the necessities or requirements from utilities, and also custom and remote services. But if you want to know more, so you should stay tuned. And on June 22nd, we will launch this new era in utility in FIMER. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Maren and Filippo. You are changing this design of central inverters in a way that you put it together by building blocks of string inverters. You say by doing this, you can reduce as well CapEx as well OpEx compared to central inverters, standard central inverters. The numbers, they really look impressive. How do the costs compare with the string inverter solution, which you keep offering as before? Is it similar?
Yeah, so maybe first of all, the main reason of using one's monolithic centralized solution is the CapEx. Now, the advantage is vanishing due to the latest improvements in modular power electronics. So now we are looking for a win-win situation for our stakeholders and us with less risks and more sustainability on the long term. So this is why this step to modular is very important, and to minimize the investment for the whole operating lifetime of the plant. CapEx and OpEx in string and modular centralized solutions are basically equivalent. So it's just up to a customer's choice.
Okay, thank you. We are talking about innovations. I mean, we have seen what you are doing, but what is behind the innovation? So what is the point where we have innovated to reduce costs?
There is a strong step forward in terms of innovation in two main areas. The first one is power electronics and the general design of our inverter, because we are completely changed the paradigm of design, making a strong step forward. We are really intensifying our efforts in power electronics to miniaturize our inverters. And if we think that respect to the previous generation, we are at the double of the power in a half of the footprint, just to give you an idea of the strong efforts we are doing into the power electronics design. The second step is on the digital capabilities. We are increasing even more the computational capabilities of our inverter. We are introducing artificial intelligence in the highest level, and we are implementing machine learning as digital capabilities of our inverter, also to improve maintenance and O&M. So we are moving in two different drivers, accordingly with two different streams. One on the power electronics, that is the base of our business, and second one on the digital capabilities, that is the next step for developing really innovative solutions for the utility market that is becoming more and more demanding every single year.
We have time for one other audience questions. How do you adapt to larger modules?
What, sorry?
How do you adapt to larger models? I mean, we have the trend on the module market that the modules are becoming larger, or have been becoming larger in the last year and this year. So how do you adapt to these?
Yeah, we are of course always in contact with the modules manufacturer, just to anticipate what are the market trends in terms of modules design. We are already in line with the new capabilities of the modules manufacturer, and our inverter is capable to be adapted, especially with the brand new high power modules with high amperage for every single MPPT. So on this point of view, I cannot give you so many anticipations because the official launch of the inverter will be on June 22, but be sure that we are working with a long-term strategy and not with a short-term one.
I'm sure we will hear more about this. We have to move on. Thank you very much, Filippo Carzaniga and Maren Schmidt of FIMER. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you very much to you.
Thank you very much.
There are two storage technologies which are closely related to solar. One is hydrogen, which we already heard about. The other is battery storage, which we will hear now about. The battery storage market is certainly more advanced than the hydrogen one, but the bottlenecks to more widespread deployment become apparent when the European battery storage market is compared to the booming US marketplace. We want to understand whether it just takes a bit more time, or will the energy transition in Europe really rely on less battery storage than in the US, or what is the reason, and will it change? Should solar companies prepare that the market will also take off in Europe? And indeed, it's developing, according to what Julian Jansen will present. Julian is head of energy storage research at IHS Markit, and he leads global analysis on stationary energy storage. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Michael.
Thank you for coming. It's great to have your insights here with a realistic view on the European storage market, and we are really excited about your presentation.
Thanks. And I will keep it very short because I think you've got a very exciting panel discussion planned just after. And really my role is to just provide some really brief input on how the European opportunity looks today, but also what's shaping that and what some of the major barriers are. You obviously all know about IHS Markit. We're the leading provider of research and consulting to provide insight into clean technology and renewable markets, including energy storage. Now, when we look at the energy storage market in Europe, I think it's a really interesting starting point. I mean, when we look historically, and what you can see on this map here is the installed base of energy storage by segment. So front of the meter in the green, orange commercial behind the meter, and blue residential behind the meter for each of the major markets. Of course, there's projects elsewhere as well, but these are the kind of core markets that we have been looking at so far. I mean, what really stands out is that historically, the storage market in Europe has been centered around Germany and the UK. And that's not a surprise because that's where the initial opportunities were for, in particular, frequency regulation, but also the German market is a very strong residential behind the meter market. But what we can see here is that it has been very kind of centered around those two markets historically, and only slowly are new markets opening up. And I will talk about that briefly on the next slide. But fundamentally, the European market is different to, let's say, when we look at the US market, because of its significant reliance still on behind-the-meter residential, which is not a bad thing per se, but it really shows that we have a long way to go and a long way to develop when we're looking at the front-of-the-meter opportunities and reducing barriers, especially for our regulatory frameworks for front-of-the-meter energy storage. So let's look at the way ahead. You know, we just looked at the installed base, but where the market going in the future? What we're showing here is annual grid-connected storage installations in gigawatt hours out to 2030 by core markets in Europe. And please remember, this includes both residential, CNI, and front of the meter. And as you can see here, and it's maybe not such a big surprise, the German market will continue to be quite strong. And throughout most of these markets, there's strong residential growth underpinning the long-term behind-the-meter market. But what's more exciting is that we're seeing new opportunities opening up for front-of-the-meter solutions, in particular solar plus storage, where we're seeing, or where there's a real beginning presenting a growing opportunity, and it's probably relatively immune to long-term saturations. I mean, so a couple of examples, we've seen the innovation tenders in Germany, we've seen we've seen storage or solar plus storage being included in Portuguese and Spanish tenders. Now, of course, they've not necessarily seen huge success yet, but especially if storage will be encouraged, or solar plus storage will be encouraged in capacity markets in those countries, we will see greater uptake. The other big opportunity I think we need to talk about is T&D, transmission and distribution enhancement. There's still, of course, some regulatory hurdles that need to be cleared here, but the development around the German grid boosters, but also the Ringo project in France, and opportunities in particular in markets with slightly weaker grids, especially in Eastern Europe, are very strong. And we need to focus here on clearing out those regulatory hurdles and enabling markets to growth. And I'm really excited for the panel discussion coming up, because I think we'll touch upon some of these points. So maybe just a couple of thoughts or some ideas or thoughts ready for the discussion we've got now. What are some core factors that can help enable storage uptake for more sustainable, reliable, and economic energy system in Europe? First of all, we need to develop the value structures that reward flexibility provided by storage assets, especially when we're seeing these co-located renewables. There's so much money funding talk going into hydrogen, which is not a bad thing, that's great. But we have to remember that battery energy storage can provide critical short duration flexibility that will be crucial and needed for our energy systems. We need to reduce the barriers around interconnection and licensing, especially for solar plus storage assets. We want to see better regulatory implementation and clarity of storage, supporting transmission and distribution infrastructure. So should storage be defined, if it's only used for this, as a pure network component, so it can be owned by transmission and distribution system operators, or can we pave the way for better third-party business models? And on the behind-the-meter side, how can we allow for better integration of behind-the-meter assets into wholesale markets, flexibility markets, as shown what the US is doing with FERC Order 2222, and also enable better time of use reflective tariff structures to reward customers building and deploying energy storage systems behind the meter. So with that, really keen and ready to get into discussion. I managed to keep it within 5 minutes, so looking forward to the conversation that follows.
Said well, Julian. Thank you very much for this presentation. Julian Jansen, Head of Energy Storage Research at IHS Markit. There are plenty more topics to discuss, which is why we are welcoming now our other panelist. Claire Miller, she's the Director of Technology and Innovation at Octopus Electric Vehicles. That is a subsidiary of the energy supplier Octopus Energy, which has more than 2 million clients, and it's working on vehicle-to-grid applications. Also on the panel, we have Andreas Piepenbrink. He's the CEO of Hager Energy with the brand E3DC in its portfolio. That's one of the leading manufacturers of residential storage manufacturer systems in Germany. And also we have Marta Victoria, who you saw at the beginning of this session, the assistant professor at the University of Aarhus. Marta is an expert for modeling of energy systems, as we have seen at the keynote at the beginning of this session. And also, I'm happy to welcome Holger Wolfschmidt. He's the Director of Market Applications for the EMEA region at Fluence Energy. It's really great to have you being part of this roundtable.
Yes, and I would like to direct the first question to Marta. You have, because I mean, you are giving us the setting because you can model the European energy system. Which sort of storage, which functions have you included?
So in our models, we include different kind of storage. We include pump hydro storage. We include the possibility of extending batteries capacity, and we also include the possibility of producing hydrogen and then converting that hydrogen back into electricity, or using this hydrogen to produce electrofuels. And what is important to realize, from my point of view, is that storage technologies are fundamentally different. Batteries have a very high efficiency, so they are particularly good for balancing solar. That's also because they have a relatively high cost for energy capacity, so they are good when they are operated at short-term storage, so charging and discharging every day. But then other kind of storage, such as using hydrogen or some electrofuels derived from hydrogen, that's particularly good for balancing the system in a more and fluctuations that are more related to wind energy. So that's also something that we need to realize, that from the point of view of solar today, batteries are like better suited, but still there is some room for using hydrogen to balance the complete system,
just to get
including
some
solar
clarity,
and hydrogen.
so sorry, Marta, just to get some clarity about the numbers. The 1,000 gigawatt of storage, that was, which you mentioned, that was battery storage. So that is the number you give us.
Yes,
For
but
that's now
that's
approximately 4,000 gigawatt hours of capacity. It's a really huge numbers. I mean, I have taken Julian's numbers. I mean, end of this decade, he is, I think, at about 8 gigawatts installation in Europe. Let's give it a bit more. Let's say 20 gigawatts. It would take 200 years to reach the value which you have mentioned. Is that correct?
that's, I mean, what we also need to realize is that the numbers that I'm providing is for a system that in 2050 works without any CO2 emission. So
that's
what
where we
these
want to
numbers
go.
are telling us is that the challenge is huge. We need to fully decarbonize the energy system, and that's going to require the integration of a lot of different technologies.
And when will we need this amount of storage? I mean, we don't need all now. We don't need it only at 2045 or whenever we want to decarbonize. When do we need it?
That's also something that we see, that what I was mentioning at the beginning, we don't see this huge amount of storage appearing in our models in the next 10 years. What we see in the next 10 years is the necessity for installing wind and solar. We need to make sure that the electricity generation is free of carbon emissions. And then later in the transition path, we see the emergence of these large capacities of storage. So from my point of view, in Europe, where we have a nice and well-functioning transmission networks connecting the different countries, it's normal that we are not seeing huge capacities being installed or being proposed before 2030. But when we need to achieve the zero carbon emissions, and it's extremely challenging, then we will need the big deployment of batteries and hydrogen. That's what we are seeing, or the time scale that we are seeing in our models.
Marta, you just explained to us that we will need a lot of storage, and we always have the impression that in the US there is a lot of storage already installed. That's always the impression. But 8.7 gigawatt hours are already installed right now. In Europe, it's 6.5. The gap is not so big, actually. Julian, why do we have the impression that the US solar market is booming so much bigger than the European storage market?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me address that. But also let me just quickly mention that when we're talking about these installed bases here, we're talking about battery energy storage. So there's obviously a lot more other types of energy storage already in the system, like pumped hydro. And that's also where the discrepancy with Marta's modeling comes from, because obviously she looks at a much more holistic picture. When you're talking about this difference between the US and Europe, 2 gigawatt hours is actually pretty substantial, thinking about how small the market still is, right? I mean, that's 25% bigger. Or the US is more than 25% bigger than the European market in terms of an installed base. But I think there's two elements we need to remember here. First of all, is that the European market is underpinned by a very strong residential market, which, hundreds of thousands of battery energy storage systems start adding up to multiple gigawatt hours. And that's something we forget, because these are obviously much smaller systems, a much greater amount of smaller installations rather than one very large bulk energy storage installation. The other picture here is the growth, right? Because we're expecting the US market to explode in 2021. We're expecting, almost a quadrupling of installations this year compared to the previous year. And we're not seeing that type of growth in Europe because there's simply too many barriers, especially for large front of the meter systems, to stop or that are delaying or slowing that type of growth. And we're seeing that in terms of project sizes, right? In the US, now 100 megawatt, 400 megawatt hours isn't a big system in the US. Tell you what, in Europe, 50 megawatt, 200 megawatt hours would be a huge system. It would actually probably be the largest system in terms of megawatt hours installed. So actually that discrepancy also adds to that perception.
You just said it. There are barriers in place, and Fluence is at home in both regions, in the US and in Europe. Holger, what is your view? What are the main battery storage market drivers in the US, and why are they missing here, or which ones are missing here?
So it was already said a lot, yeah. So main drivers in US is definitely in need of storage to do old fossil power plants, for example, for replacement. So real capacity need there. It's also a kind of an infrastructure need in US and a clear target set and a top-down approach. So these systems, Julian talked about 50, 100 megawatt or 200 megawatt. This is not really unique anymore. These are a lot of systems deployed there. Clear top-down targets, looking at California market. We are talking about 3 gigawatt per year if needed. And also clear rules from the FERC. It's a regulatory, overall state regulatory issue with the 871 and 2222 rules to really set the goals for storage and make it possible to even include the storage in the planning phase already. This is a little bit lacking in Europe. This is a little bit behind, to be honest. Maybe also not as pragmatic and as front-running this possibility to advocate for storage. About the storage times, just to mention, we are talking regular up to 4 hours battery storage in US. Very successful, and then also creating a high numbers in gigawatt and gigawatt hours. So 5 gigawatt, 20 gigawatt hours, it's not creating flood pressure anymore.
And do you think that this will happen in Europe, that we will get the regulations that will enable a very, very big utility scale boom, or is it just wishful thinking?
I believe it's on the way. Yeah? So what Julian also said, it's on the TSO, their discussion, and we are talking about triple-digit systems, which is fine. Portugal, Spain, talking about renewables and storage also in larger assets. Yes, I think this is the way. I think it can be done more and faster in the need, but also on the other side, these aggregated small residential C&I will play really a big role. The infrastructure is perfect in Europe. So transmission grid, distribution grid, compared to other region or continents is definitely at a higher level and will create other opportunities in storage sizes.
As far as I want to get clarity on one point, because as far as I've understood, I want to come back to this 1,000 gigawatts, which Marta has mentioned. They are really battery storage, so they are not pumped hydro and nothing else. It's really battery storage, which you see for these numbers. Correct, Marta? Because Julian, I think, understood it differently. Yeah, because then I would like to, I mean, we are now thinking about, yes, does it go a bit, but I mean, don't we have to wonder how we can install this 1,000 gigawatts? I mean, maybe we will come to residential storage soon, but Andreas Piepenbrink, you are coming from industry. Do you think it's possible to build 1,000 gigawatts in 30 years?
Yeah, the answer is very simple. I mean, we will have 10 or 20 million electric cars annually, and each of those has 50 kilowatt hours. So the answer is that simple. Of course we can.
Okay, we will come to vehicle to, that is a good answer. We will come to vehicle to grid later. We have time for one audience question. Marian, is there one?
Yes. This is a question for Marta at this stage. People are interested whether we can split the demand for storage between the different European countries. Are there some that are just in need for much more than others?
So what we see is that clearly those countries in which the optimal solution includes a higher solar penetration, and that's of course southern countries, they also bring a higher need for batteries. So it's clear, what we clearly see in the models is that there's a big synergy between solar PV and batteries. So those countries with high solar PV penetration also include batteries. And I just want to make the remark that I strongly agree with what has been said. I did not mention that batteries needs to be static batteries. The capacity for, if we assume that all the vehicles in Europe are converted into electric vehicles, we get much more than 1,000 gigawatt of power capacity. So the potential is there, in my view.
To this will come shortly, but because then we can also discuss how much that will reduce the amount which we need for stationary storage. But I also want to have a closer look to residential storage market, because we see that some markets are more for utility scale, some go more for residential, like Germany, for example. They're at works really very well. And also the energy scenarios of Fraunhofer ISE, for example, or of Agora Energiewende contain a lot of residential storage. But is this a German exception, or will that also come? I mean, there's also some other countries in Europe, we know that Italy or UK, but Andreas, do you think that will come also to other countries? Do you, for example, plan to build up, to export also to other markets in Europe? And what are your scenarios there?
The answer is quite easy. In Germany, we have the most of it because we have the most dirtiest grid and we have the highest energy price because we try to install solar and storage by heavy fundings. But honestly speaking, the need is to have the building sector, new buildings, to have them CO2 neutral. And therefore, I see the need for whole Europe and for the whole world to install PV and storage in those buildings, because the energy transition is not made in the grid, it's made from bottom up, and the building is a major part of it. And it's a direct function of regulatory frameworks, but how to build houses directly affects the carbon footprint. And therefore, I see a need for everybody. But of course, every country is specific, and also the net metering stuff and the way how the CO2 price will be introduced, country specific. But yes, in general, I see a need for every country, and because the the building itself, it's a fundamental part of the energy transition.
But sometimes we hear also,
in the grid, it's you can wait forever until the grid will fundamentally change.
But sometimes we also hear, or very often in the past at least, I have the impression it's changing a bit, but we heard very often, yes, the people are installing storage in the homes, but it would be much more effective if we would do that in the quarters, a bit more centralized installations, not huge, but a bit more centralized, which is not allowed by regulations. What do you think? Would it be cheaper to do it, let's say, quarter-wise or something like this?
No, it sounds funny, but it's not, because the decentral thing is much more efficient. And don't forget that the business case is much better. I mean, if you do it in the grid, like the FTM guys in US, you need regulatory frameworks, heavy subsidies, governmental-wise, to have the same business case. So what you do in homes, which is called self-consumption, is direct climate protection, and it's a much better, bigger business case, which fuels the private investor, and has nothing to do with the same business case if you do something in the grid. So there's a fundamental belief that decentral self-consumption is a major part of the game, and therefore I'm not convinced of the central things which are undone since 30 years. And you can also wait until we get new lines from the north to the south, but you can just start at your home, and therefore it's a way of thinking. But decentral is better than central in many cases.
I would like to hear Holger on this. I mean, because your Fluence is more famous for the bigger installations. How do you see this point? Do you have an opinion on it?
We definitely see that central systems will be a role, and there will be needs centrally of the system of storage and flexibility, because you can handle it centrally much easier compared to a decentral approach. Especially if lines are there and you can directly influence the electricity or electric grid there. It will be not centrally only. I think the same goes in the direction. It will not be decentrally only. What we cannot guess at the moment is if it's a 50-50 share or 30-70 or something like that, but we are totally convinced that central units will be needed.
Julian, what is your impression? What do you think? Does it matter, large scale or residential at the end, or is it just a choice at the end? It's a bit coincidental depending on energy prices, but...
Let me unravel a few points that have been said, because I think we need to be very, very careful, because there's obviously some clear thoughts and views that are being kind of thrown out there. I think fundamentally there's scope for everything. So there's a need for decentralized solutions. There's a need for more centralized solutions. There's a need for smart integration of electric vehicles. There's a need for smart integration of residential systems. I would First of all, I would heavily disagree with the point that was made that in the US, front of the meter is heavily subsidized. That's simply not true. And we have to remember that the German residential market only grew because it was heavily subsidized in the early years. So it's not about subsidies, it's about the value that different storage assets can provide. The other thing that I think is really important to highlight here is that residential storage is currently just being deployed by customers that can afford it to reduce the energy costs. So it's actually a very inequitable way of reducing energy costs, and it's not there for everyone, because actually you'll be increasing the energy costs for everyone else. Anyone who lives in apartments, flats, and so on who can't afford it, their energy costs will go up because the transmission distribution charge gets levied across. Now, I know we can address this in different ways, but what I'm trying to say is residential storage is good. I'm not saying it's not. It's great and has a role to play, and it's crucial for customers to reduce their energy costs where energy prices are high. And it's a great way to also enable decarbonization, especially in the building sector, like Andreas said. New builds, both residential, commercial buildings, it's a huge problem, and we need to bring down carbon emissions there. But we need to think about what are the problems and what are the solutions. And at the moment, we're seeing residential storage being deployed in no way to be used by the grid and to be helping the grid. And similarly, front of the meter, large scale storage, and let's say more distributed front of the meter solutions also have a role to play depending on what problems we're trying to solve. So I think it's very important to understand that in a much more holistic way.
Let's have a short answer by Andreas, but please keep it short because we want to come to vehicle to grid.
One point for Julian. He's right, but the behind the meter business in the US is also heavily subsidized. They are printing money, and there is also a business for storage in Germany, front of the meter business, which is at the end of the day also heavily subsidized by taxes of the dear valued consumers.
Okay.
So everything is subsidized at the end of the day. The question is how to move to CO2 neutral society. And in the US, I mean, they are not the role model for this because they are the biggest wasters in the world. So we have to be very careful what is right and what is wrong. A fact is that we have to bring down CO2 and based on whatever you want. And if you have a government which does a central approach, it's good. And if you have a government which thinks that the individual should pay it, I do not care. I just want the CO2 neutral society.
Okay. Now we have spoken about the two ways, either to put the storage into the basements of the homes or place them out on the grid in front of the meter. But there's the third option that we touched upon earlier. It's vehicle to grid. And Claire, you have a project in the UK where you try out with a large group of people how to use batteries in electric vehicles for the grid. What can you tell us about it?
Sure, thank you for having me. Yeah, we're running a trial, Octopus Electric Vehicles, which is part government funded, and we are exploring the business models and the customer experience of vehicle to grid. So we're exploring some of the opportunities around domestic storage, where your storage device is a mobility asset, so your car, and behind the kind of customer experience, we're looking at ways of supporting the local grid and the national grid as well.
And why, if I was a customer of yours or a client of yours, why would I be motivated to use my car's battery to support the local grid?
Sure. So we have a lot of engaged customers who are very energy savvy. So we have got a lot of those people on our trial, but we have people who are not so technology savvy, but who also aspire to supporting a kind of net zero society and want to get involved somehow. And we see a growing shift in terms of awareness of energy and energy storage and mobility. So on our trial, the way the customers are incentivized at the moment to plug in as much as possible is they're rewarded with a cash reward for plugging in a certain number of times calendar month. And we have a tariff and a reconciliation approach so that they're not out of pocket when they are discharging energy to the grid from their vehicle. And we will shortly be moving to an enhanced offer with different time of use tariffs and kind of alternative rewards, which is part of our work on the trial to actually explore customer behavior and customer acceptance of different incentivization and reward models.
And can I ask you, what do you think, how much money do people need as a reward to actually buy into this and become active and be part of the grid?
Well, that's the killer question, and I'll be able to tell you a lot more in 6 to 12 months' time in terms of our actual findings. But what we found so far is that our current offer is acceptable to customers. So we offer them £30 sterling for 12 overnight plug-in sessions, and that enables us to discharge and charge the battery according to our other grid and service requirements. And that seems to be acceptable to our customers. So yeah, I'll be able to tell you a bit more once the trial has gone through. The other thing to tell you in our early findings is that our customers are incredibly engaged, and in fact plug in on average 18 to 20 times a month, and some actually almost every night of a month. We set our bar quite low, I think, on reflection, with 12 plugins a month. And I think other trials are finding similarly that when it comes to domestic engagement with these kind of projects and these services, customers are incredibly engaged actually, and are willing to, whenever they can, plug in and make their car battery available.
I just have to jump in. We have to say goodbye to Julian, who has a hard cut at 4 p.m. Thank you for joining. We are going a bit over time because I think it's an interesting discussion, and we started already a bit late. Thank you very much, Julian. Claire, I'm interested in, have you thought about which sort of stationary storage you can replace and how much you can replace?
Again, we're still in the early stages, and we're focusing purely on the experience of vehicle to grid rather than looking at that kind of broader question. But we feel that there's a place for both the mobile battery assets of an electric vehicle as well as those fixed assets of a battery at home. I think there's another question around the scale, and as we start to see more cars and vehicles available that can participate in vehicle to grid, it will also start to put a focus on whether static storage at home in a domestic setting is really required. And again, my own personal view is that we will see less requirement for that, and we'll be able to look to the vehicle to grid, to the bidirectional solutions in order to provide battery storage at home. And particularly given, I think, what we're going to see in terms of shifts in ways of working and around cars and EVs being at home a lot more during the day, I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how that does actually play out, because it makes it even more suitable to have your EV acting as a storage device for your solar, for example, now that EVs will probably be at the home more than they were 2+ years ago.
Then let's go to Andreas, because also E3DC, I was with the German term, E3DC, you're also investigating vehicle to home and probably also to grid. What is your project?
Yeah, we design inverters for different kind of architectures. So we do PV options for our home storages, which can do vehicle to home. And we do standalone chargers, which just replace the AC charger at home by a DC V2X one. So we do the technology and we will introduce it. That's what we do technical-wise, and business-wise, we will probably distribute it in a few years as a standard option for everybody.
But you will also make it controllable by the grid at the end, so it will be also vehicle to the grid? What do you
Yes, it's a standard technology, Michael, because you might know the famous smart meter gateway introduction in Germany, which is dead slow, but it's predicted to come. And the keyword is EE-bus. So there is a standardized interface, which our dear valued V2X charger can speak. And then it's up to the distribution grid operator to do the things what customers like, rewarding things like flexibility or money or whatever.
Marta, you have also investigated scientifically how much battery storage can be replaced by vehicle to grid. So what are your findings? Will it replace all at the end?
So I think that the potential is there to replace all of it. We don't see that this is what is going to happen. We see storage batteries being provided by domestic static batteries, by grid-connected static batteries, and also by EVs. I just would like to emphasize that there is one very interesting synergy coming out of the fact that EVs are connected close to PV installation at homes. And this is that having this flexibility close to where the demand is can also mean reducing the peak power flows going through the distribution grids, and then reducing the needs for reinforcing or extending the distribution grids, which can also provide some benefits for all the consumers that do not have an EV or a PV installation. So there's also a benefit of having both solar PV and static batteries located in a distributed way and not in a centralized way.
Let's take the time we are already a bit over time, but let's look what the audience wants to know. Marian, are there audience questions?
There's one question we will have answered now, and that is, we have talked a lot about vehicle to grid, but does not only take the energy companies and the storage companies to take up the challenge and build these systems, but also the car manufacturers to prepare their cars for it. Do any of you have, and I'm seeing nodding from Andreas right away, maybe I point that question to you first. Do any of you have any experiences with car manufacturers, how they are preparing for this type of challenge?
Yes, so I can only speak for the German ones. So they are preparing an international standard which allows every car of their fleet to communicate via 15, 8, 11, 20 is the keyword. And what the obstacle is in the future are regulatory frameworks from the grids, which are not yet given. But in principle, every German car will allow this within the next 36 months, I guess. So every new car will be compatible.
Okay. Claire, maybe you are also nodding?
Yeah, I would agree with that the international standard is in a final stage of draft, and as soon as that is harmonised and adopted and fully published, then we'll start to see it rolling out to the manufacturers of vehicle manufacturers and of charging equipment manufacturers. I know that there's a lot of pent-up enthusiasm and a lot of technical work has been going on, but really until that standard is issued, I don't think anyone is necessarily going to move in case it does change at the last minute. But I think, yeah, as Andreas has said, we're looking forward to that point, and we're already starting to talk to manufacturers and have those early conversations, because everyone wants to move ahead as fast as possible once we pass that point.
I mean, I'm still always with this 1,000 gigawatt. I'm sorry for that. Marta, you dropped this number, and that's a huge number. I mean, there are uncertainties. Let's be the half of it, or even a quarter of it. It's still a lot. I now start with Holger. We need at least a high amount of storage. Do you think vehicle to grid will take it all? And when do you think that regulation will adapt that, let's say, at least a quarter of that, what Marta calculates and models, will be achieved?
I don't think that vehicle to grid will take all. Yeah? So otherwise, it would be very hard in my current position. Yeah? Everything would go to vehicle to grid. So I don't think really that everything goes to vehicle to grid. About the ratio of the portion which will be stationary, I think to find out. Yeah? So I cannot really provide a hard number, but it will be stationary. I totally believe that there are local needs which cannot be solved with vehicle to grid. So it will be a kind of a stationary solution. And about this 1,000 gigawatts or whatever 1,000 gigawatt hours or 4,000 gigawatt hours after, what's the need there? About the production and the deployment, I do not have any doubts at the moment. So looking left and right, what it will be produced in future, or what is already produced now in terms of gigawatt hours and batteries for deployment issue, I do not see any big challenges, to be honest. Even vehicle to grid or stationary.
Okay, so that means we can summarize the market is coming a bit. I mean, we have seen this 8 gigawatts from Julian. It has to come a bit more after this end of the decade, because we need something like a gigawatt, a quarter of a gigawatt or something like this, but we can build that after 2030, but maybe regulations change and it will also come before. Would you agree with this?
Regulations are key. Regulations are key. As all the panelists are stating, regulations are key. If you're not allowed to deploy it, not allowed to earn money, or allowed to install a project, this is key. regulation and revenue streams.
Okay.
If this is done from a technical point of view, I do not see any really big challenges.
Okay.
Scale up and let's be done.
That is a nice word at the end, because we have to come off the end. We are already a bit over time. Thank you very, very much for taking part on our panel. Julian Jansen has already left. Claire Miller, Octopus Electric Vehicles. Andreas Piepenbrink, Hager Energy and E3DC. Marta Victoria, University Aarhus. And Holger Wolfschmidt, Fluence Energy. Thank you very, very much. Storage and hydrogen, two fields closely related to solar. I'm sure there will be many opportunities given the need which scientists like Marta Victoria are modeling. I hope you have got fruitful insights, and it was interesting for you to participate.
We also want to thank our networking partner and FIMER and Platinum, Gold, Silver and sponsors, and of course the partners that took part in this session. You saw Smartenergy earlier, also Enapter, BayWa and FIMER took part in this session. Thank you. FIMER is the partner for networking. During the last 2 days, you still have the chance to participate and network with your industry peers. Just starting now after this, the networking rooms in English and German are going to start.
We had a fully packed program in 4 sessions during the last 2 days with more than 50 guests, networking and meet the speaker sessions all along the four cornerstones of the energy revolution, which we are currently experiencing and which will accelerate within the next 10 years, I think in almost unimaginable manner.
The PV magazine Roundtables Europe but our reporting goes on. You can read monthly about the topics touched here on this event in our English magazine and quarterly in our German issue. As a reward for your participation, you can get a 10% discount on your subscription. Just use the discount code Roundtables10.
And of course, this was the last PV Magazine event this year. You can look forward to an insight at All Energy in Australia in October and our Roundtable US in November. And don't forget our many webinars and spotlights throughout the year. Please also, when you now drop out of our live session, fill in the survey of the event, which is linked in the event app, but we will also send you an email link to this. Have a nice day and goodbye.
Goodbye.